For years, the public UAP story has lived in fragments. A witness statement, a blurred clip, a hearing, a denial, a promise of transparency, followed by silence. We've been shown enough to stay interested, but never enough to see the full picture. And that may be the point, because in Washington, the fight is changing. No longer over rumors, no longer over whether the phenomenon deserves attention, but over something far more dangerous to the system, the hidden archive. Now, Congress is asking a different question. Not do UAP videos exist, but how many exist, who has them, and why haven't we seen them? This is not a story about one object in the sky. It is a story about evidence, control, and the moment lawmakers stopped asking politely. Welcome back to UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I'm your host, Matt Tones. Thank you for joining. Please remember to subscribe and share our podcast. It means the world to us. Today's episode is about a shift, and it's titled The Hidden Videos: Why Congress is Escalating the UAP Fight. So the episode is not a shift in the sky, but a shift in Washington. Because for years, the public UAP story has revolved around the same cycle. A witness speaks, a lawmaker reacts, an office promises transparency, and then the core evidence stays out of reach. But in late March and early April 2026, that cycle changed in one important way. Congress stopped speaking in generalities and started demanding specific video files by name. In a March 31st, 2026 letter to Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth, House Oversight Task Force Chair Anna Paulina Luna said whistleblowers told the task force that AARO possesses additional video records of potential UAP sightings, called the lack of transparency troubling, and said AARO's response had been less than adequate, and requested delivery of a list of video files by April 14, 2026. That is why this episode matters, because this is no longer just Congress wants more disclosure. This is now Congress believes specific UAP videos exist, believes AARO has them, and is escalating pressure to get them. And once that happens, the whole story changes. It stops being purely cultural. It becomes procedural. It becomes evidentiary. It becomes a fight over who controls the archive. That is the frame for today. Not have aliens been confirmed, not is disclosure finally here, but something more grounded and a more important, in many ways, more important. Why is Congress now fighting over hidden UAP video, and what does that fight tell us about the state of the evidence? Let's begin with what is solid. On April 1st, 2026, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform publicly announced that the task force on the declassification of federal secrets was continuing its investigation into UAPs and the federal government's lack of transparency. The committee said Luna had sent a letter to Hegseth requesting a series of video files related to UAP sightings. The underlying letter is even more revealing. It says the task force's investigation was informed by a September 9, 2025 hearing, and that whistleblowers informed the task force that AARO possesses additional video records of potential UAP sightings. It also says the task force views UAPs in and around US restricted airspace as a very real threat, and that response from AARO when questioned and provided data had been less than adequate. That is the first intelligence takeaway. Congress is no longer merely asking abstract questions about transparency. It is signaling that it believes a specific undisclosed video archive exists and that the current public output from AARO does not reflect the full inventory. Now let's look at the list, because the list itself may be the biggest story. The letter requests at least 26 entries, with some entries containing multiple sub-videos. The titles include cases such as 4 UAP formation in Iran on the 26th of August 2022, Syrian UAP instant acceleration 2021, UAP USO formation Wiley 2 by Zinc, cigar-shaped or fat spherical UAP on the 15th of October 2022, spherical UAP over AFG in and out of clouds on the 23rd of November 2020, AFSOC Kabul UAP in 2017, USCG C-144 UAP 2 Tic Tac IR Hot, 24th of April 2024, Eglin Air Force Base, F-18 Flip UAP, MQ-9 Observer UAP in East China Sea on the 5th of January 2023, and several UAP in vicinity of Columbus O'Hare Airport. The list also includes a reference to the Lake Huron shoot-down event from February 12, 2023. That matters for several reasons. First, the requested files are not all one kind of case. Some are clearly military aviation cases. Some appear to be maritime or transmedium cases. Some are tied to foreign theaters, including Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, the East China Sea, and Kazakhstan. Some are tied to U.S. domestic airspace, including Eglin and Columbus. That suggests the archive Congress is targeting is not a narrow collection of internet-famous incidents. It looks more like a distributed operational archive gathered across commands, theaters, and sensor types. Second, the naming conventions are revealing. Some entries sound descriptive and almost cinematic. For example, instant acceleration, or cigar-shaped, or fat spherical, or pulsing over water. Others sound like internal operational labels or call signs like Wiley 2X Zinc, or Warlock 4X, or Voodoo 4X, or Jacker 2X, Cactus 1X, or Hackney 6, and another example is Toxic 6. That is usually what you see when records come from real military reporting channels rather than from public relations summaries. Third, the list reinforces something researchers have suspected for some time. The most interesting UAP archive may be less about one spectacular case and more about a broad pattern of militarized observation across multiple regions. Now, we need to ask the obvious question. If these videos exist, why haven't we seen them already? And here is where the story becomes more complicated. AARO has released some official UAP imagery. Its public imagery page includes a mix of resolved and unresolved cases, many of them from European and African theaters, with some involving infrared footage from US military platforms. That page includes entries AARO says were resolved as balloons, birds, or not anomalous, alongside some unresolved entries and one 2024 European case where AARO says with high confidence the footage depicts the presence of a physical object. So AARO is not withholding everything, but that is exactly why Luna's letter is so important, because it implies the public imagery page may be only a partial public-facing slice of a much larger library. And once Congress says whistleblowers told them AARO holds additional video records, the burden shifts. The question is no longer, does AARO publish anything? The question becomes, how much of the real archive remains outside public view? That is the second intelligence takeaway. The transparency fight is no longer about whether AARO has an archive. It is about whether the published archive is representative of a hidden one. Now let's consider the geography of the list, because that may be one of the most overlooked details. The requested items span the Middle East, Afghanistan, the East China Sea, Kazakhstan, Europe, US coastal and domestic airspace, and at least one apparent USO or undersea related case. That matters because it undermines the lazy assumption that the UAP story is mainly a narrow domestic political debate centered on a few US Navy clips. Congress is now targeting what looks like a global military censor problem. If even a fraction of these cases are substantial, then the archive is describing not one hotspot, but a distributed pattern of aerial anomalies surfacing in operational theaters. And this is where the current episode becomes especially relevant to the broader history of UAP disclosure. For years, the public has been given a handful of iconic clips: Tic Tac, Gimbal, GoFast, and encouraged to debate those endlessly. But the Luna letter suggests the real story may not be those famous public clips at all. The real story may be the unseen middle layer, the case is serious enough to be logged, named, preserved, and discussed internally, but never elevated to public legend because the files never escaped the system. That is a major point, because once you understand that, the current conflict stops looking like a fight over one or two videos. It starts looking like a fight over curation. Who gets to decide which cases become public symbols and which remain buried inside metadata, internal references, and closed channels? Now, a responsible analysis has to pull back here. A list of requested videos is not proof that every case on the list is extraordinary. In fact, AARO's own public page shows that many apparently mysterious infrared clips later resolve into balloons, birds, or prosaic aircraft-like signatures. Several Europe 2022 entries are explicitly listed as resolved as a balloon, while others are unresolved but described as having unremarkable behavior or insufficient data for conclusive attribution. So we should not turn Luna's letter into Congress has 26 alien videos. That would be bad analysis. What the list proves is narrower, but still significant. Congress believes these files are important enough to demand. Congress believes AARO has more than it has published. Congress believes UAPs in restricted or military airspace remain a security issue. And that is enough to justify this episode, because this is how serious archive fights begin. Not with a dramatic confession, with a records request, with a deadline, with a mismatch between what one side says exists and what the other side has shown. Now let's talk about why this is escalating now. The letter explicitly cites earlier hearings, including the task force's September 9, 2025 UAP-focused hearing and a November 13, 2024 hearing statement from Rep. Nancy Mace. In other words, this April 2026 move is not isolated. It appears to be the next step in an accumulating congressional frustration, hearing first, public pressure second, then specific demands for the raw material itself. That means the deeper story may be institutional. The task force is effectively saying, we have heard the testimony, we have heard from whistleblowers, we have asked the office questions, and now we want the files. That is the third intelligence takeaway. Congress appears to moving from oversight by testimony to oversight by evidence inventory. And that is an important difference, because testimony can be dismissed as interpretation, and inventory can't. If the videos are delivered and mostly turn out to be prosaic, that strengthens AARO. If they are delivered and several are clearly stronger than what has been publicly implied, that weakens AARO's public posture. If they're not delivered at all, then the story becomes not just UAPs, but congressional access itself. Now think about the symbolic cases embedded inside the list. There is an Eglin Air Force Base reference. There is an F-18 Flip UAP reference. Sorry, that should be FLIR UAP reference. There is a Lake Huron shoot-down reference. There are USCG Tic Tac-IR references. There are multiple spherical UAP entries. There are transmedium implications in the USO cases. That matters because it shows the requested archive isn't just one weird blob in infrared. It appears to span many of the very categories that have dominated modern UAP debate: formation, spheres, tic-tac-like objects, maritime transition cases, restricted airspace events, and cases tied to major military platforms. That does not confirm a unified phenomenon, but it does suggest that the hidden archive, if released, could materially reshape the public conversation, either by normalizing many of these categories into prosaic explanations, or by revealing that the public has so far seen only the safest and least disruptive slice of the overall record. And that is why the title of this episode matters. This is not just Congress wants more files. This is the hidden videos, because the true conflict is over visibility. What counts as public evidence in the UAP era? Who decides when a military case is ready for release? And what happens when lawmakers publicly imply that the most important evidence is still behind the curtain? Now let's make the cleanest assessment we can. As of today, the strongest evidence is that a House task force has formally requested a large set of named UAP videos from the Defense Department. The request was justified by whistleblower claims that AARO possesses additional video records. The task force believes UAPs near US military airspace pose a real security concern. AARO already publishes some imagery, including resolved and unresolved cases, but Congress appears to believe that public output is incomplete, and a deadline of April 14, 2026 was set for delivery. That is already enough for a serious episode, but because one specific evidence is demanded in writing, the transparency story becomes measurable. Either the files come or they don't. Either the archive opens wider or it doesn't. Either AARO's public posture is vindicated or it isn't. And that is why this has been one of the most consequential UAP oversight developments in years. Not because it proves what is on the videos, we do not know that yet, but because it transforms the debate from belief versus disbelief into something more concrete: inventory, access, and accountability. So the final intelligence read is this: the real battle is no longer whether UAPs are taken seriously inside government. They clearly are. The real battle is over whether the public is seeing the same archive Congress believes exists. And if Congress is right, then the next phase of the UAP story is not another hearing. It is a struggle over the hidden video layer beneath the hearings. This has been UFO to UAP, the Disclosure Report. I'm Matt Tones. Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe, share the podcast, and don't forget to tell your mum about our episode.